In Untold Stories, we talked about Canada's participation in the Pacific War, which not many Canadians know much about. But one of the aspects that we participated in was the invasion of Kiska, one of the Aleutian islands off of Alaska. In 1942, the Japanese invaded both Attu and Kiska, neighboring islands in the Aleutian Islands chain, and they occupied them for about a year. In August of 1943, the Allies decided to reconquer Kiska, and Canada was part of that invasion that was planned, fighting alongside the Americans. Now, the Japanese actually evacuated the island prior to the invasion, so when the invasion went ahead, there was basically a punch into thin air, but obviously we recaptured the island, and part of that effort was the 1st Special Service Force, which was a joint US-Canadian unit that actually trained in Alberta and Montana. One of the individuals that went ashore in Kiska was Ivan Novoleski. He was with the Royal Canadian Ordnance Corps in charge of supplying ammunition to the Allied troops. And he actually went all over Kiska looking for souvenirs that the Japanese had left behind. So they left behind a lot of detritus, some medical packages, vitamin packages, and various things just from the usual occupation that they had there. But they even left behind a lot of ammunition. So this is actually a feed strip for a Japanese machine gun, Type 92 heavy machine gun with some of the cartridges still attached to it, which was quite interesting. Speaks to a bit of a rushed evacuation on the part of the Japanese. But one of the more poignant objects that he found was this grave marker. And this is actually on a piece of an American plane. During the occupation, the Americans periodically sent over bombing and strafing missions, and on this particular occasion, an American pilot went over Kiska. He was shot down, but as a tribute to his bravery, the Japanese actually wrote an inscription on this piece of his plane and set it up as a grave marker. And interestingly, it's written in English by an individual who obviously went to school in the United States. And it's, the Japanese, they respected bravery quite a bit. So it was one of the more, one of the more important keepsakes that Ivan Novoleski had of his time there. He went on later on to serve in Northwest Europe, so Belgium and France, and survived the war. And we did a bit of an oral history with him as well. But he's just one of the many stories that you can see in Untold Stories.